interactivity in gaming, and can games achieve social and artistic legitimacy? In-game development brings new opportunities for audience interaction and debate, and in some cases offers a deeper level of interactivity. It may even inspire a culture of resistance. What are the possibilities for serious games as a learning tool and language for cultural expression? What is the potential for games to say something other than boom? And I'll be introducing you to all the members of the panel in full as they start their papers, but just quickly we have Damian Scott, Justin Halliday and Rebecca Cannon. Damian will be our first speaker, so you may have met Damian earlier in the day in the session on Unreal, but Damian Scott has long been associated with the mod scene in Australia, having been with Team Fortress Software before its acquisition and adaptation by Valve for the Half-Life franchise. Damian currently heads up independent games company Primal Productions that specialises in Unreal Engine consultancy and prototyping. He also works for Swinburne University as a lecturer in games and interactivity, with research interest in the psychosexual aesthetics of gaming. Damian writes a monthly column on mod development for PC Power Play called Mod Life, which deals with issues of independent development. Thank you, Damian.
Yeah. Actually, can I just start by saying that I've actually just quit from PC Power Play?
Oh, really?
Yes. Change of editors, and I had an argument with the editor about how much of a jerk I thought he was, and he didn't agree, so we parted ways at that. 18 months of service, I quite enjoyed the time though. No, that was the early one this morning. Yes. I do subscribe to the itchy and scratchy movie policy of having at least 60% new content, or it's not cut from extra stuff that I've done from other lectures. But I thought I'd jump in first with this particular presentation, mainly because my fellow distinguished panellists will get into much more nitty-gritty detail than I will, other than that this is certainly becoming a research interest of mine, and along with my colleague Christian, we're sort of starting to get some very interesting programs off the ground with Swinburne University and Serious Games as a basic. I do apologise. The word modding up here, I did want to change that to make it a little bit more abstract. Modding, for those of you who don't know, is when you get the tools that the actual developers use to create their own games, and they release it to you so that you can create content for their games as well. So I did actually mean that to be a little bit more abstract, because there are obviously much more ways of getting access to technology that allows you to author games. This was just one, so I apologise for that. What you see here, probably four different points here that I think serious games are approached at. Now, I'm not going to articulate serious games just yet, because as you're going to find out today, the actual term does encompass a fairly wide range and diverse style of gaming products out there. So I will address certainly some of the more prominent examples of that, and hopefully Justin and Rebecca can guide you into some more extreme, and you know, as extreme as it gets. This relates back to Jonathan's talk about the blue blob, and I think the role of serious games in sort of pushing boundaries, not just in terms of gameplay, but what is a game. So rapid prototyping seems to be a definite dimension. Now, the actual what you are prototyping, this is where we now subdivide. We're seeing now things called art mods, which are basically artists who are coming to gaming who have no understanding whatsoever about the mechanics of actually creating a game. DirectX, OpenGL, they don't even know what it means, they don't care. All they have is access to tools that allow them to get in there and actually look at the aesthetic qualities of the interactive experience and say, what if I change this and that? And for most of us that have been brought up on a diet, a genre-fed diet of action titles and adventure and this and that, some of it seems quite contrary to kind of our experiences with gaming, but I do believe that the future of gaming and the future for me should actually entail the death of Hollywood between 25 and 30 years. That's certainly something I want to aim for. Death, but resurrection in a new form. These guys are sort of leading the way. Now, serious games, for me, traditionally used to mean simulations, like a flight simulator, where you could actually unequivocally play the game and think, I reckon I've got a pretty good idea of how to, now fly a plane. And you've seen kind of maybe films where, there's been a pilot go down and the hostess says, anyone can fly planes? Like, yeah, I've played a flight simulator, I think I can help. And, with varying degrees of success, they get there. There was a white paper released in the 60s, which basically described games right back in the 60s, and this is kind of still punch card stuff, called The Future Language. And what really interested academics at the time, especially educational academics, or academics focusing on education, was the experience that the users reported that when they got into the game, and the game was a social network, and you basically explored at your own pace, and they found that retention of knowledge was much more. You would walk away having experienced these underlying educational facts that were hidden in the game in your own pace and own time, and you just retained it better than someone like myself lecturing to you now, giving me points off the slide. So they called it the future language, and whether or not we're still on the path of that, or whether or not they foresaw the degree of graphics technology and interactivity that we have now is questionable. But I still think now is a really, really, really good time to get back and revisit that kind of feeling that, yes, it's a language, and possibly not a language that we understood all the grammar and rules for. And sandboxing. Sheer experimentation. As I said, I am someone who has no experience whatsoever with programming. I'm a technical artist with design skills, but I've often been frustrated in my professional career as a developer by not understanding technical things like code. It drives me nuts. But I can come to the problem from a completely different direction. And I've found that the projects that I've been attached to and have had some success with is that by not having that, I still bring something very valuable to the process. And in a previous life, I was a filmmaker. May get back into it, who knows? Even though I've said I'd like to kill Hollywood. Might find that a little bit of an irony. I certainly believe that there is a lot of room there to sort of do much more interesting work. Being from a university, I think that's the other dimension now, that when I talk about serious games, I talk about them in the very simplest fashion. I'll put it down the bottom of the list, I shouldn't. The effects debate. And a colleague of mine at Swinburne University, Dr. Mark Finn, talks about this. He's from media, does a lot of media theory. He talks about this thing called the effects debate, and that how there's been a rise with mass media, when newspapers and television and radio suddenly allowed news to get everywhere very quickly, that it's gone hand in hand with fear. And obviously you can compare that to things in the current American government regime, and how it kind of is often criticised for creating an atmosphere of fear. And then you compare that to a game like GTA, where you get to live out ghetto fantasies in the safety of your bedroom. And, rather than living in fear, you only feel like you're safe when you get back to your bedroom and you can actually sit there and play, and those fantasies come out. So I'm interested in what's going on there, and I think it goes well beyond just this arbitrary notion of violence, watching violence, imitating violence begets violence. I think that's an argument that gets debunked every time there's some kind of political agenda, and suddenly a politician says, let's protect the kids, so that the opposition party's wonderful new tax reforms are suddenly not as important as us protecting your children, and we'll ban games because they're too violent. Anyone not heard of Jack Thompson? Well, I'll take that as everyone knows who Jack Thompson is. He's very critical of the games industry, and I actually think he's a good thing. I think he'll help us clean up our act. I think there is a degree of morally reprehensible content that does circulate in industry. I think there are questions that can be asked about games, about where they're going morally, that can't be answered. And they go, we just expect our audience to connect the dots and realise I shouldn't go out and imitate this behaviour. Rating systems, obviously, social responsibility, I think, is the big one here for me. And it goes side by side with this question over here. Is it wrong to have games pose serious questions when they're so clearly aimed at a fun and educational space, which is your leisure time? Do we really want to be bombarded with political statements? Now, there's been a big furor at the moment about the Resident Evil 5 trailer, where it's actually set in Africa. And people say, so it's a game about killing black people. Everyone says it's a game about killing